Welcome, or welcome back, to This Week at TEGG. And what is TEGG? TEGG is the Ed Greenwood Group, an international, multilingual, transmedia publishing and media broadcasting network presided over by the effervescent author, world builder, and now publisher, Ed Greenwood, the Archmage, me. This week in Hellmaw. This week, we're putting our spotlight on Hellmaw, HoneyBoy's Hunt by Marie Bilodeau. Link below. Once a top soldier in BlackQueen's army of hunters, Hon, also known as HoneyBoy, hasn't reported to the Widowweb forum in weeks. During his last mission, he let 2 friends die, and consolidating loss and victory is proving difficult. He needs a break to eat ice cream and remember what it was like to be human. To remember who he'd been before becoming one of BlackQueen's elite hunters. But the powerful daemon who caused the death of HoneyBoy's friends seems to have gone berserk, drawing dangerous attention and hurting some of HoneyBoy's fellow forumites. Hon has to get back in the game, guilt and all, or risk losing even more friends. For the hunters of the Widowweb forum, there can be no rest. Hellmaw, HoneyBoy's Hunt is a Bodyless series Widowweb companion novella to Hellmaw, Eye of Glass by Marie Bilodeau. It's best read after Eye of Glass. This week in Storm Talons. Storm Talons is a rich, sprawling fantasy setting. Not all of it looks or feels like King Arthur or Robin Hood or another sort of medieval European fantasy. This week, we'd like to put our spotlight on a book that feels a lot more like a fantasy version of India, with pirates. Specifically, The Pirate King's Daughter, a Storm Talons novel by Dileep S. Rangan. Link below. Captain Gaeta Chadbaram of the deepwater trader the Cat's Paw captures a merchant trader foolish enough to sail without flags of protection. On that trader, a strange monk fouls the air with foreboding and menace. Little does Gaeta know that she and crew will soon have to fight for the survival of a kingdom that will brand her as the Pirate King's Daughter. And we sat down with the author to talk about The Pirate King's Daughter.
And we're off.
So, I'm here today as Ed Greenwood of the Ed Greenwood Group, and I'm talking with Dileep, who wrote The Pirate King's Daughter.
Thanks, Ed. Let's start again, shall we? not a natural videoist.
No, that's okay. I think we could just start in talking about it.
Just start with the questions, right?
Yeah, okay.
Put the intro in later.
Sure, yeah, we can play with this. Okay, so, what made you set The Pirate King's Daughter in a place off by itself?
Well, primarily it was, I liked the world of Asmer and the concept behind it, but I wanted a more South Asian feel. And clearly Asmer struck me as much more North European or European in its culture. And so I felt that it needed to be separated to really be able to be the self-sustaining culture, which is quite different than the rest of the setting. Otherwise, I think you end up with setting complications of too much cultural shift too quickly.
Yeah. And yeah, because then you have to stop the action of the novels to tell stuff to the reader, and some of the readers will go, I don't care. Or some readers will go, why are you stopping? Because I know this stuff.
You know this stuff. Yeah. And also it becomes a lot more complicated because the story is based around pirates and an economy of piracy. It actually ties a bunch of the coastal regions together. And so that didn't exist necessarily in the World Foundry version, the first version, so I thought it would be easier, in fact, is to set it aside and build it in Jaya Sudera as a separate, but part of Asma.
Okay, so why the particular characters you chose?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I was thinking about the story, I had a few thoughts in my mind. So one of the great opportunities here was to build your own world and build your own character set, and I've kind of always liked piracy, and there's a swashbuckling nature of that, freewheeling nature of that world, and I had finished reading some work on the Barbary pirates, and so my mind was probably well stoked and primed to write about it. So that was the impetus for the piracy as an economy versus piracy as a bunch of guys running around attacking ships.
Okay, yeah.
And then I think I've always liked, and I'd read a few authors who were writing for science fiction stories taking place in India, taking place in different parts of Asia, and I thought it would be good to have a storyline base there, because culturally there's some things you can do with that, and it gives you a chance to explore it a little more differently versus having a pirate story, which is typically the Caribbean and the Mid-Atlantic. So I thought that would be sort of a bit of a difference in opportunity to write and expand on.
Cool, okay, and in this first book, we start by, we meet a mystery character on board another ship, and that's a journey every author has to make, because, you know, they're all mystery characters to the reader when they first, you know, it's, I'm meeting someone new, and then the question that I always find fascinating at this point is, whose head do you go inside, or whose shoulder do you look over if you're not going inside anybody's head, and why do you pick that person for that viewpoint? Do you stick with the same character throughout the book? You obviously, in many books you can't, and so when do you decide to move?
Well, I think for the most part, I wanted to stay character focused for sure. So you wanted to give the perspective. If for most of the scenes on the ship, I would be looking over the shoulder of the captain of the Pirate King's daughter, Gaita, who's the main character in the book. And so where she's in the scene, it's told more or less from her perspective, though you're clearly a third-party listener. But I think, as you said, you have to naturally step away from that when you do different scenes, because it's not all her perspective. So when it is the mystery character, Warzag, the priest, and he's off somewhere else, you have to do it from his perspective. He's clearly the center point. And so for me, it wasn't so much looking over their shoulder, it was choosing a focal point for the scene, and writing around that focal point and the importance of that person.
And how much do you give away to the reader early on by letting the reader see things like Gaita can't see because she isn't there? How do you make that choice? I mean, everybody has to make it.
Yeah, it was a tough choice. I did a couple of drafts of several chapters because I really wanted to be dialogue driven. So I probably in the first draft had far too much dialogue and not enough narrative voice to provide that little peppering of color and flavor that came through. So I wasn't trying to give about too much to the reader in the background narrative that quietly tells you the whole plot line. And so what I wanted to do was add culture and flavor through the narrative and give you insight into the character without telling you too much about, you know, the whys of the world, but tell you how it works. So they would think about, oh, I have to pay for this, or I have to get this kind of... So tell you about the mechanics through the action.
Yes, yeah. When you were writing The Pirate King's Daughter, who do you choose to be your main viewpoint characters, to either be inside their head or look over their shoulder? And why do you choose that, and why do you change things throughout the book?
Well, certainly you have to change things as the scene changes, because the book is not a first-person novel. So I've changed, as we move from character to character or scene to scene, you would naturally change if the characters are changing. And I didn't write it in the first person because I did want to give the reader a perspective of what was happening in the scene around them, and they should be introduced to the other characters and allow the characters to all have an inner voice as well. And so when I wrote the scenes, I actually wrote them of a focal character, not so much over the shoulder as if it's from the perspective of Gaita, the Pirate King's daughter, but she was clearly the focal point of the scene. And so you get more involved in the character who's the focal point, but you also learn about the rest of the characters and the culture as they have a discussion.
So how much do you want to keep mysterious about your characters, and how much do you want to share with the reader so they know where the character's starting from?
Yeah, I don't be too mysterious. I like I like the reader to have a good sense of the character pretty quickly. But what I wanted to avoid was a long narrative paragraph to say, and Warzarg, the evil priest, acts like A, B, and C. So they get walked through. They should learn that through the dialogue, the actions, the little steps. So you reveal the character slowly, and let the reader start building their own impressions, and maybe you challenge that impression later on.
So you've got the characters begin as mysteries.
Yeah.
And you might even misdirect because they're trying to fox the other characters that they're dealing with. And so you might, as the reader, jump to the wrong conclusions at the beginning.
Yeah, that's partially true. But I also wanted to make sure that these characters weren't unidimensional. Mm-hmm. So you don't have a character who's always good, who's always right.
Yeah.
And so you need to have that the foxing is a bit of saying, and this time they made a mistake.
Right.
And this time, this person was a bit meaner than you thought because she's a pirate. She's a commercial pirate, so she's gonna make decisions based on. Actually, that's what she would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get it, but you don't have a character who's always twirling their mustache.
Correct.
As the orchestra plays the evil villain theme, he comes on and says, "Yes, and now I must do my evil villainy," because he does nothing else. Yeah, I get it. Okay. I'm always intensely interested as a writer. Why did you choose this point to start the story as opposed to another point?
Yeah, so the decision on the starting point was, from my view, actually when I wrote the story, I actually had a view of the end point of the first book. And to some extent I worked back from this final scene, but also I wanted to start with some amount of tension. Mm-hmm. So the first scene in the book, to me, is that sort of starts with a bit of dramatic tension, and you enter the stage as things are just starting. So to me, that made the logical standpoint versus halfway through an epic battle, or halfway through, or a long prelude to the startup. But I thought it was more, for me, it was just better to have that tension at the point. So it was right at the start of the events that are taking place. Okay,
yeah. There's always a debate among writers. Do you do prologues, or you think prologues are terrible? You know, that sort of thing, and there's no right answer. We all do it differently. I was just curious as to why you made the choices you did. Now, the other thing that I would immediately ask is, why this protagonist? Why did you want to tell her story?
Well, certainly I liked the idea, and I was very interested when I started writing about pirate and pirate culture and the economy that goes around with that. And if you read the history of the Barbary pirates, it very much is an economic decision, much more than a swashbuckling fun question. And so that's what I enjoyed. And I chose the characters because I wanted to set it in a world that was Southeast Asian or South Asian in nature. So that drove the cultural determinants. And then on the gender of the character, I just thought it would be interesting to write a female lead character and then try writing it. And the challenge was to try writing in a way that gender didn't matter. Mm-hmm. That the whole world, you'll see characters pop up and the choice of gender is just a function of who that person is, and not necessarily because all women have this kind of job or men have these kinds of jobs. So I thought that would be more interesting as a challenge as a male writer, but as a writer generally to do.
Okay, and did you, when you think about that culture, is there any notion of caste or something that you're born into and you have to either accept it or transcend it by stepping outside? And piracy, of course, would be one way to step outside, right?
Yeah, very much so. Much more, I would say the idea of caste is that the pirates are a culture, so they're not a runaway point for people. So this is what they do. This is what generations have done. Right. So the characters there are merchant classes, and there are wizard groups, which I think you more likely find your way into because of capability and ability. But, there are the people who lead the thinkers, and there are aristocrats. So there are those broader meta classes in society that people generally stay within, which is probably more in tune with that sort of feudalistic society.
Right, so different from what we think of from Hollywood, where the pirate crew is this mixed bag of outlaws who fled.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Thank you very much. This
Thanks,
is cool.
This is great.
Yeah, this is fun. And it's time to take a look at Onder Magazine 4, the Merchants issue. This fourth issue of the Ed Greenwood Group's monthly resource for today's storyteller includes Ed Greenwood, that's me, waxing rhapsodic on the many and diverse delights of cartographic splendor. Examinations of interactive fiction and the potent allure of maps for storytellers. A continuation of our examination of the ancient craft of chainmail for the modern crafter. A creative profile of Martin Traynor, author of the novel Hellmaw, Dark Creed. More metafiction from the story settings of Hellmaw and Storm Talons. And yes, comics, book and game reviews, and more. We like to give things away at TEGG. And this week is, yes, double giveaway week. Ooh. The first 100 customers this week can get a free copy of Hellmaw, Your World is Doomed by Ed Greenwood. Oh, me, yes, if they purchase a copy of Hellmaw, HoneyBoy's Hunt by Bilodeau. Link below. Simply follow the link and enter the coupon code DOOMEDHUNT at checkout. That's the word doomed and the word hunt all run together as one word. This code expires at the stroke of midnight Eastern Time on the 25th of June, 2017. And the first 100 customers this week can get a free copy of Words of Unbinding, a Storm Talons novel by, yes, it's Ed Greenwood again. Yes, Words of Unbinding by Ed Greenwood. If they purchase a copy of The Pirate King's Daughter, a Storm Talons novel by Dilip S. Rangan. Link below. Simply follow the link and enter the coupon code Pirate Words at checkout. That's the word pirate and the word words with an S on the end, all run together into one word. Yes, this code expires at the stroke of midnight Eastern Time on the 25th of June, 2017. Out and about this week at TEGG. We're sure there are members of TEGG out and about somewhere this week, but they're all on secret assignment. Let the Archmage know if you spot one at the Adverse and win a prize. And that's all for this week at TEGG.